Hello and welcome to Bright Ideas with me, Anita Rani, a podcast brought to you by EE. I'm speaking to experts and celebrities about their lives to find out the life hacks and apps they use to be the very best version of themselves. I'll be focusing on 4 key areas that together make a more fulfilled life: home, career, appetite to learn, and how you unwind and relax and have fun. Each conversation is packed with tips, tricks, and advice we can all use to help improve our own lives. Well, I am delighted to introduce my next guest to Bright Ideas, clinical psychologist, Dr. Julie Smith. You might recognise her from her socials, where she shares her expert tips on managing anxiety, stress, and emotional resilience. Or you might have bought one of her best-selling books, including her brand new bestseller, Open When. Julie, thank you for joining me on Bright Ideas. I'm very much looking forward to getting your perspective on how to live a happier and healthier life. I always start with the same question to everybody. On a scale of 1 to 5, how happy are you today?
In terms of, I'm feeling pretty good at the moment, actually. I'd say, 4 or 5. I'm enjoying life.
Very good. Why is that? What's been happening?
For me, it's kind of, I think I probably think about things a bit differently around happiness to a lot of people. I think a lot of people associate happiness with pleasure and only sort of positive emotions and when everything feels safe and lighthearted. But for me, happiness is more about living in alignment with a deeper sense of purpose or your values when you have clarity on those, and knowing that you are spending your time doing what matters most to you. And at the moment, I feel that I'm doing a lot of that. So,
Very good. So we've got 4 categories, Julie, to get through.
Okay.
But before we do, a couple of quick fire questions for you. What's one small daily habit that has the biggest impact on your mental health?
Well, in some ways, when I talk to people, I always kind of warn against this type of thing in the sense that there isn't just one thing that will change everything. You know, lots of little things accumulate and add up together to make a big impact. But I would say in terms of the kind of the smallest thing I do that always, without fail, has some sort of positive impact for me is being in nature, actually being outside in sunlight when we get some of it, and being either in the green or near the ocean. For me, every single time, it has some sort of net positive for me. In good times and bad. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't change the problems I'm facing or what I'm going through, but it definitely allows me to sort of reset and kind of shift my trajectory slightly, I think.
And we know that nature has a positive impact on our mental health, don't we? It's a fact.
And it's free.
And it's free, yes. I actually say it's nature is therapy on tap. For me, a very British thing, cup of tea first thing in the morning. Is there anything in that? There's just something about my ritual of having a cup of tea. I put a cardamom pod in it, and it's 5 minutes where I just don't do anything other than focus on drinking this cup of tea. I mean, it makes me feel like I can begin my day.
Yeah, and there's something in ritual and the predictability of that and those small moments that it allows you to take back and slow down for a moment. And, you know, there's the things that make you kind of stop. You can't really rush around while you're drinking a cup of tea or while you're even preparing one. It enables you to pause for a moment and just focus on the thing in front of you and what you're doing. So it's a little mindfulness moment, isn't it?
Yes, and there's a delicious payoff as well with a little kick of caffeine. I think we should just get into it because I've got so many questions to ask you, and we are all clinging on your words and your answers because we are all searching for answers at the minute. And we feel like you're the person to tell us. So let's start with our learn section. And this is how we keep being curious about the world. So what's one simple mental shift that could help people feel happier and more in control? I know this is a very general, big questions, but what would you suggest?
Make you feel happier and more in control? Well, I think in some ways they're almost 2 separate questions, aren't they? You know, the things that can make you feel happier aren't necessarily the things that will make you feel more in control. And I think people assume that feeling more in control will make them happier. But a lot of life we can't control. And so a lot of what we would teach people in therapy is building that ability to tolerate the uncertainty of life, and being able to distinguish between the things you can control and the things that you can't, and then choosing where you place most of your attention. So if we, ruminate on the things that we can't control, and almost kind of, it's almost like a little tug of war in our own mind about, if I worry about this enough, then I will find a solution to it, or I will be able to control it in some way. And a lot of things that can't be applied to. And so, having that distinction between things you can control and things you can't, and then focusing on the things that you can control that also have a positive impact on your life if you control them, makes a huge difference. But it's in terms of, something, so it's one small thing you said that could make people kind of feel happier.
Well, yeah, let's just take something very general that's happening at the minute, which is just the world around us. And just the world feels like it's shifting, lots of interesting, strange, unpredictable things happening in the news. And a lot of people are feeling quite a way about it, quite anxious, and have a loss of control. So kind of what advice could you give all of us right now?
You could just consume yourself right now with bad news and things that feel worrying or negative. And if you do that, if you choose to focus on that all of the time, and with 24-hour news channels and things like that, you could just keep going with this stuff and absorb it nonstop. And the impact on your mental health would be a negative one. But actually, we also have our world in terms of our own life, our own family, the people we care about, the friends around us, our communities. And it's there that we can have an impact. And that's no less real than the wider things that are going on in the world, or having a balance of focus. So it's okay to update yourself and know what's going on in the wider world, but then to be sure that you have this balance where you also focus on what's going on in my life, what matters to me at the moment, and not what you want to happen to you, but how you want to show up, the kind of person you want to be in your community, and how you're going to serve that community and the people in your life, and how you're going to make a difficult time better, or at least not worse. And from there comes this service that comes out of love and points the direction towards certain work and a sense of purpose, things you can do to contribute, and turn that sort of suffering and that sense of uncertainty into something that matters more than how you feel right now. So something that even in an uncertain world, or when you're not really feeling great, still gets you up in the morning because it matters more than you feeling comfortable.
It's what you started our chat with, that sense of purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the antidote to the turmoil that you can sort of churn over in your own mind by just doom scrolling on headlines and things like that.
Absolutely, which is what you're doing. You are giving us your purpose, which is to impart this wealth of knowledge and insight that you have into how we can all kind of keep our minds on track. So how do you keep yourself up to date? Because there's always more learnings as in your field. So are you constantly kind of reading other papers? Like, how do you stay on top of everything?
Yeah, well, I'm a complete psychology nerd, really. I think I'm giving you a really kind of neat looking background here, but on the floor next to me, there are piles and piles of books that I kind of build up over time. And there's all sorts of piles of paper on this desk that I'm not showing because it's messy. But yeah, and you know what? It reminds me of a professor I had at university who, a lot of what you do when you're studying is sort of regurgitating and trying to remember and recall stuff that you've been taught or that is written down. And actually there was a professor who handed out, on the first day, she handed out all these notebooks that would fit in our back pockets. And she said, as you go about life, ask silly questions. When something interests you or you don't quite understand it, we were obviously studying psychology, so at the time it was about people, should write down the question. And then from there, we look at that with curiosity and we see if we can turn it into research and we can actually try and answer that question. But I think in general, that applies to everybody in real life, doesn't it? If you approach everything that you don't understand with curiosity. So if a lot of what we do in therapy is turning from judgment to curiosity and saying, well, that's interesting. I wonder what that's about. And from there, then you can kind of direct your learning. And it's become such a, I guess, a lifestyle for me, in that sort of lifelong learning has almost become just a part of who I am, really, where I'm interested in certain aspects of human beings and the world. And when I ask those questions, I'm interested enough to then try and find out from, different sources or different books, what perspectives people have on it.
I want to move on to the work section now, because obviously it's not uncommon for people to feel anxiety and stress at work. And as a clinical psychologist, you've got plenty of tools to help people in these situations. So if someone is struggling with self-confidence, particularly in a professional environment, what would you say is the first step they need to take to build their strength? And I know that's a broad question because obviously everyone's situation is different, but if someone is feeling overwhelmed by their workplace, what can we all do? And that happens to all of us at some point, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's a common question where people say, how can I feel more confident? And a lot of people, even people that, come into therapy, they will hold back on doing things that matter to them until they feel more confident about it. And what I always say to people is we cannot convince ourselves to be more confident by sitting in the room and talking about it. So the way that we build confidence is being willing to be in that space where we don't have any. And being willing to stay there and be the beginner and make mistakes and trip up and get ourselves back up again. And so, your brain learns through evidence of action. So, you'll see online all these things where people say, look in the mirror and tell yourself, I am confident and I'll have no fear. And and it's really just not that helpful. The way that you build confidence is through evidence of the action. So being in that space that you fear and experiencing it going well so that you realize that's a possibility, and also experiencing it not go so well and then witnessing yourself survive that so that you don't have to fear failure anymore. And so, each of those experiences build confidence over time. So confidence isn't something to aim for. It's a byproduct of being willing to strive and in that be vulnerable and make mistakes and fail along the way, but still aiming for something that matters to you, that you want to master or, make a good contribution towards.
Are you going to have to share an example of some time in your life when that's happened?
When I've built confidence.
Yeah, when you've put yourself in a situation that absolutely terrified you, that even you, with all your kind of understanding of how the mind works.
When I started sharing videos online, I wanted to share the educational aspect of therapy that people were finding so helpful, because I didn't see why people had to pay to come and see me to find that out. But I never anticipated that it would get so big. And so once that happened and all of these people were sort of watching the videos and then following, I was being asked to do things like live TV and radio. And the only way that I was able to do that sort of thing was fully committing to myself that if these horror stories in my mind that are going, oh gosh, I'm going to trip on the step and flash my underwear to the nation, or I'm going to say something wrong and humiliate myself, or all of those little horror stories that come, into your mind when you're nervous about something. The only way that I was sort of able to then go ahead was that if those things happened, I commit to having my own back. That voice in my head will not sound like a bully, and it will not sound like a critical parent or anything else negative. It will sound like a coach for an athlete who believes that there is value in doing this thing, and that there is value in getting back up when things go wrong. And, and so it felt like if I said no to some of those opportunities, I would be doing that out of fear alone, because there was a chance for me to help more people and do a positive thing. So I felt like I needed to practice what I preach. But in doing that, I just had to commit to looking after myself along the way.
Oh, I like the idea of talking to yourself like a coach and not a bully.
Yeah.
I mean, you do so much. Psychologist, content creator, author, very successful, young family. How do you manage it all? How do you stay productive without burning out?
It's a balance, really. And I'm really aware of the sort of toxicity of a lot of what goes out on social media. And I've never wanted to join in with that and give the impression to people that, I've got it all sorted and therefore never experience human moments. And that's really what my books are about. They are all of the different situations that humans face at some point that inherently leave us with confusion and lots of emotion and difficulties in, how to respond to that. And so really, for me, it's about that self-awareness of when things are out of balance. So, now I think I've learnt to sort of put in place those boundaries that enable me to say no to things when they're not in line with my values. So I stay very clear on what matters most to me and what my values are. And, at the top of that pile really is my parenting and my relationship and those sorts of things. And so even if they're brilliant, wonderful opportunities, if they don't fit, if they're not in line with who I want to be in those areas of my life that matter the most, then they're a clear no for me.
Yeah. I started thinking, how is this serving me? And also the dynamic being a woman, I guess for me, a woman of colour. And I've sort of seen on a lot of social media, which I love, especially when it comes from younger women. There was somebody who'd put something up saying, stop asking me to come and work for you for free. I'm not going to do it anymore. And I was like, I love this girl. Yes. Okay, brilliant. She's drawn a line. How important has social media been for you to get your ideas across, and particularly sort of new ideas and new research?
Yeah, well, I guess it's the only reason that I did anything publicly at all, that it just felt like it was where everybody's attention was. And all of this sort of, a lot of people don't realize that, when you go to therapy, you do a lot of talking, but you also learn a fair bit about how your brain works and how to impact on your mood and your emotions and your relationships. And a lot of people, I felt, were coming to therapy didn't really need long-term, in-depth therapy. Once they had some of that education, they were so raring to go. People were saying, and that's where the title of my first book came from, people were saying to me, why has nobody told me this before? This is not rocket science. It's fairly easy, but when I take it seriously and I put it into my life, it's making a big difference. And so I used to hop onto my poor husband and say, this stuff should be more available, and people shouldn't have to pay to come and see someone like me to find that out. And so he said, well, go on then, make it available. And we made a sort of couple of terrible YouTube videos at the beginning. And then just as the timing would have it, that was the beginning of this sort of rise of short form video. And he said, well, why don't we try and do some sort of bite-sized stuff, just a simple message in each video. And it became this sort of creative challenge of, well, how do we compete then against the scrolling thumb and make something that is quite abstract and sometimes quite serious, potentially engaging and entertaining so that people listen for a bit.
That's nice teamwork as well, that you had his support and that he was with you saying, let's do this, and encouraging you to do it.
Yeah.
Do you worry about how much misinformation is out there, particularly when it comes to psychology?
I was aware of that there's a lot of rubbish out there. And I thought, well, I can sit in my therapy room and complain about that. Or I can put something positive out there in my small little corner of the internet so that anyone who is scrolling has a slightly increased possibility of coming across something that I know is evidence-based and, good quality information that could lead them somewhere positive.
Yeah.
And so I'm just, fully committed to that, really, trying to be as helpful as I can. And that was our only requirement for every video, was that it had something in it that could be helpful to someone out there.
And it's worked. Now, we all have that go-to app that makes life a little easier. This podcast is powered by EE, helping you get the most out of your favourite apps, whether it's managing your calendar, streaming your favourite shows, or discovering new recipes. EE's fast, reliable network ensures everything works seamlessly. No matter what app you're using, EE keeps you connected and in control. You mentioned that you film everything with your husband in your home office. So let's talk about home and the best tips and hacks to live a sort of smarter and brighter life. But how, if you work from home and you're in your office, how do you create space physically or mentally that helps you switch off?
There's probably two different ways. One for me is being outdoors, right? So creating that open space, being outside, being in nature, or being with animals, all of those sorts of things create that sort of ability to de-stress. But I think there's also a place for that inner world. So, I love to read. And so there's something in that as well. It's a sort of mental pause, isn't it? Where you're not constantly going through your to-do list or the things that are causing you stress. You're delving into a story or whatever it is you're reading about at the time. I think there's something really valuable about those moments. You can use both depending on what you need.
I know in theory how I need to sort this out, but sometimes I'm one of those people and I hate myself for doing it. I'm always sort of, when people say, how are you? I always say, oh, busy. I'm trying to stop using that word busy. And the idea of reading for pleasure at the minute just feels like such a, oh my God, can I even allow myself to do that? Because there's just so much life going on. What kind of practical advice can you give people who are just in it, the grind?
Life so busy that you start to just hear your own heartbeat, or your head starts pounding and you realize, oh my goodness, I have not, taken 10 seconds for myself today. And something I talk to people about when we talk about kind of stress management in situations where we cannot take those stresses away. We often kind of explore with people this idea of, what if you have 15 minutes between two meetings, what if instead of scrolling on your phone or checking your email, you stepped outside and you just stood there? Those small micro moments that exist throughout the day, what if we took those back? Because you can replenish your mind so quickly. It's quite surprising that if you do that for a small amount of time, the difference you feel. And so I think when life is just so full and we are so busy and we don't really see where we can take anything back, it's got to be in those small moments.
Are you someone who responds straight away? I'm thinking of WhatsApp.
No.
Yes, me neither. Okay, we acknowledge that we all need some time away from our telephones, but then when we pick them up again, because they are vital for our existence, are there any apps or tools you personally use to support your mental well-being or might help with mindfulness, sleep, or monitoring fitness? Or maybe you don't use them, but you know that they're very good that you could recommend.
Yeah, no, I did. One that I have used for years and actually always used to recommend to clients when I was teaching them how to sort of practice mindfulness was the Calm app. Mindfulness is such a difficult skill to learn just by yourself, being silent. Having really good quality kind of guided meditations just supports that learning and gives you that sort of guidance through something that can otherwise be easily kind of, it's so easy to give up.
Let's talk about game now. Let's talk about how you actually relax. You've talked a lot about going into nature and how that recharges you, but what else do you do to switch off?
When I go off to London and I do some things, or I go on this morning or whatever it is, and then I come back, there's this sort of downturn of, the stress response comes back down, and I need to seek almost the sense of safety and security that for me comes with being at home with my family, really, and that, connection with the people in my life I feel closest to, be that, my children, my husband, my friends, my family. And I love nothing more than, time at home with those people, usually lots of food around. We started getting lots of board games in and playing, board games with the kids and stuff on a Friday night. And oh my goodness, that is special time.
Yeah.
It's really, really special.
I've got some quick fire questions for you. So let's just get stuck into these because before we get to our Bright List recommendation.
Okay.
Someone at a party confidently declares you can fix anxiety by just thinking positively. Do you let it slide or do you jump in?
Oh, goodness. Do I let it slide or do I jump in? The temptation would probably be too much for me. I'd probably have to jump in.
What would you say?
What would I say? I would acknowledge the thread of value in there. If thinking positively really zapped anxiety, then that's what the content of therapy would be. It's often a misconception people have when they come into therapy that you're going to teach them to think right and have the right thoughts and how to eliminate the bad ones. And it's just not the case. A lot of it is about acknowledging that you can't control the thoughts that arrive, but you do have command of the spotlight of your attention.
Mm.
And you have to make this clear judgment about why you're doing that. And to know that, if you give the spotlight to, one of those thoughts that is spinning a narrative that's having a negative impact on you, then you have to be aware of that.
Mm.
And equally, you have to be aware of, if I was to shift my attention and focus on this other possible perspective, then I would feel differently about things, or I would behave differently.
Mm.
It's your brain's job to constantly assess and make meaning of your surroundings and what's going on, or those kind of things. And it's not always positive. So you're going to have thoughts that sound negative at times because you're human and that's what you're set up to do. But if you then attach the idea of failure to that, it's not a good equation. So it's being able to kind of sit back from our thoughts and see them for what they are and know that we can choose between them.
Do you think there's a generational difference between how we view mental health, anxiety, and how we deal with it? I'm thinking about someone who is, what am I, Generation X? And, there wasn't talk about mental health. That's not right at all. Thank God now we're in a place where we are talking about it and acknowledging it.
Mm.
But having said that, there was certainly an ability to have resilience because you just knew no better, rightly or wrongly.
Yeah, and what we don't want to do is zap people's aspirations to be strong and resilient and deal with things in a way that's going to make them proud.
Yeah.
When I'm doing talks and people ask about, how do I support someone that I love who is struggling with their mental health?
Yeah.
One of the things that I'll say is always, don't do things for that person that they can still do.
Yeah.
You don't want to take away from their ability to witness their own sense of agency, so help people in the direction towards recovery.
Mm.
If someone is still, for example, making their own meals every day, don't take that away from them, because those become things that you then have to claw back later on. And they're so much harder to come back to than to maintain.
It's good. I like it. It's good life advice. Let people kind of fend for themselves a bit as well. We want you now to pick something for our Bright List to leave with our listeners, Julie, if you could. This is anything. It could be a film, a song, an album, a TV show, a game, a board game, anything that's inspired you to live a little bit brighter, something that's helped you maybe think about the world a bit differently that could do the same for us. So what would you like to add to our Bright List?
So it has to be something specific.
Give us anything. Could be general. We've had all sorts. Well, we can bend the rules.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking, as I was looking at my kind of piles and piles of books here, I kind of thought as an activity, reading has been that thing for me. Every book I've read has slightly shifted my perspective or expanded my mind a little. And so for me, that process of reading goes back to that idea of living curiously and turning from judgment to curiosity over and over again, so that you can continue to learn. It's not about what you can have, it's about who you can become. And for me, reading has enabled me to do that, to kind of think about who I wanted to become and also show me how to get there.
Love that. Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.
So that's it for another episode of Bright Ideas with me, Anita Rani, brought to you by EE. Please join me next time for more conversation where I uncover the tips and tricks to live a brighter and better life. And if you want to hear more about EE's bright tech ideas to help make everyday life that little bit easier, visit telegraph.co.uk/smartlife. There's loads of smart advice, from setting up parental controls to keep your kids safe online to making sure you never run out of data when you need it most. So until next time.